All right, let's get into it. The story of the computer. It's one of the most amazing stories you'll ever hear. I mean, we're talking about a journey that starts in the middle of a world war, with secret machines built to be weapons, and somehow ends with that same incredible power right here in our hands.
So here's the big question, and it's kind of mind-blowing when you really think about it. How on earth did we go from a machine that weighed 30 tons, yeah, 30 tons, like a tank, a machine that took up an entire massive room,
To this, something you can just slip into your pocket. You see, this jump from these massive giants to something built in a garage, well, that's not just a story about tech. It's a story about what people can create when the pressure is on.
So where does this all begin? Well, like a lot of huge technological breakthroughs, it starts in the chaos of war. During World War II, there was this desperate, urgent need for fast calculation. We're talking about things like aiming artillery, designing better airplanes, and maybe the most important of all, cracking the enemy's secret codes.
And here's something that's just wild. This whole revolution, it wasn't just happening in one place. It was popping up in parallel, totally in secret. Over in Berlin, you had this guy Konrad Zuse, basically working all by himself. He built something called the Z3 to help with aerodynamic calculations for the German war machine. It was a pioneering machine, but it was destroyed in a bombing raid, just gone. It's a crazy reminder of how easily these incredible early inventions could have been lost forever.
Okay, so at the very same time, across the English Channel, the Allies had their own ace up their sleeve. And it wasn't a tank or a plane. It was a place. A quiet country estate called Bletchley Park. But don't let the scenery fool you. This was the top secret heart of the entire Allied code-breaking operation. And you could argue it's the real secret birthplace of the computer as we know it.
And right at the center of Bletchley Park was this incredible machine, the bomb bay. This was the brainchild of the genius, Alan Turing, and it was built for one job and one job only, to crack the Nazis' Enigma code, which everyone thought was impossible. Imagine hundreds of these things just clattering away, 24/7, relentlessly hunting for the daily key to unlock German secrets.
But of course, it wasn't that simple. The war dragged on, and the Germans rolled out an even tougher code, called the Lorenz cipher. The Bombay just wasn't enough. The codebreakers at Bletchley knew they needed a bigger gun, something faster, something purely electronic. They needed a giant.
And that giant was Colossus. This thing was an absolute beast, designed by an engineer named Tommy Flowers. Now get this, it used 2,500 vacuum tubes and could process 5,000 characters a second. What that meant was, a job that used to take weeks could now be done in hours. This gave the Allies a live feed, practically, into the enemy's highest-level plans. It was such a game-changer, its existence was kept a state secret all the way into the 1970s. Incredible.
So, the war ends, and all this amazing technology that was born in secret, it finally comes out into the light. And you know what happened? The machines got even bigger. This was the dawn of the electronic giants, these massive computers built for big science, for government work like the census, and of course, for the Cold War.
Just think about this number for a second. 30 tons. That's how much the ENIAC computer weighed. When this thing was unveiled to the public in 1946, it became the poster child for this new computer age.
I mean, the scale of ENIAC is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around. We're talking almost 18,000 vacuum tubes. It was 1,000 times faster than anything that came before it. In fact, people believe that in the 10 years it was running, ENIAC did more math than every human being combined had done in all of history up to that point. Just wow.
But here's the catch with ENIAC. For all its muscle, it had a massive weakness. To give it a new problem to solve, you had to physically rewire it with plugs and cables. It could take days. The real breakthrough, the idea that changed everything, came from a mathematician named John von Neumann. His idea was so simple but so profound. Why not store the instructions, the program, in the computer's memory, right alongside the data? Suddenly, computers weren't just powerful calculators. They were truly programmable machines. And that single idea, it's the blueprint for literally every computer, phone, and tablet we use today.
So these giant computers were amazing for sure, but they were also huge, power-hungry, and unreliable. All those vacuum tubes got super hot and burned out all the time.
So to get from that 30-ton beast to something you could put on your desk, well, that was going to take a completely different kind of revolution. A tiny spark that would change everything.
And here it is. That spark was solid-state electronics. This timeline basically tells the whole story. First, you have the vacuum tube. Big, hot, and fragile. Then, boom, 1953, the transistor. It's tiny, it's reliable, it changes the game. Then in the 60s, we figure out how to cram a bunch of those transistors onto one piece of silicon. That's the integrated circuit. And the final leap, in 1971, we put the whole brain of the computer, the CPU, onto one single tiny chip. The microprocessor was born.
You know, this revolution didn't start with a bang. It was actually pretty quiet. Back in 1953, some researchers in England showed off the very first computer that ran on transistors instead of vacuum tubes. It wasn't a giant, but it was proof that it could be done. And that little demonstration, that was the beginning of the end for those room-sized electronic giants.
Fast forward to 1965, and all that progress leads to something new, the mini-computer. Now, I know the name is kind of funny today, but the PDP-8 was a huge deal. Yeah, it still cost $18,000, so not exactly cheap, but that was a fraction of what a mainframe cost. For the first time, you could have a real computer in a university lab or a small business, not just in some giant corporate data center. This was the moment computing power started to spread to the people.
And this is where the story takes a really cool turn. We're leaving the top secret labs and the giant corporations behind. The new setting? It's a suburban garage. And our heroes aren't government scientists and lab coats anymore. They're hobbyists, tinkerers, these rebels and visionaries who had this crazy idea that computers shouldn't just be for the powerful. They should be for everyone.
Okay, just look at this comparison. It's absolutely staggering. In less than 30 years, we went from ENIAC, 30 tons, costing millions, needing a whole team to run it, to the Altair 8800, a 20-pound kit that you could buy for under $300 and build yourself. Yeah, the memory was a joke. 256 bytes. That's not even enough to hold a single tweet today. But that wasn't the point. The point was, for the very first time, a regular person could own a computer. This was a total philosophical shift.
And that new philosophy needed a champion. And it found one in a garage in Cupertino, California. A brilliant guy named Steve Wozniak designs the Apple I, a computer for other hobbyists. His friend, Steve Jobs, is the one who sees the bigger picture, who knows how to sell it. They get an order for 50 of them from a local store, and just like that, Apple Computer is born. The garage revolution officially had its rock stars.
So now we're in the final chapter of our story. The big challenge now is, how do you take this thing that only geeks and hobbyists love and turn it into something your mom and dad could use? A friendly, powerful tool for everyone. One that would, completely change the world.
The Apple II, that was the watershed moment. It wasn't a kit anymore. It was an appliance. You took it out of the box, plugged it into your TV, and it worked. Suddenly, you had color graphics and games right there in your home. And Apple did something genius. They got these computers into schools. They basically raised an entire generation of kids who weren't afraid of computers, who saw them as tools for creativity. But there was still one big hurdle. To use a computer, you had to type in all these weird, cryptic commands. It was like learning another language. The solution, which was actually inspired by some amazing work done at a research center called Xerox PARC, was the graphical user interface, the GUI. Instead of typing, you had windows, you had icons, and you had a mouse to point and click. For the first time, the computer was learning to speak our language, instead of making us learn its. And this whole idea, this spirit of rebellion, was captured perfectly in that legendary 1984 Super Bowl commercial for the Macintosh. It wasn't just selling a computer, it was selling an idea. The idea that this machine was a tool for individuals, a way to fight back against conformity, against a kind of Orwellian big brother.
So think about that journey, from a 30-ton secret weapon of war to a tool for creating art, music, and connecting with people all over the world. It's just an incredible story. And it proves that the biggest, most world-changing ideas don't always come from the biggest companies or the most secretive labs. The last revolution, after all, started in a garage. So it makes you wonder, where will the next one begin?